What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Hobby Pants in the house. Hope everybody is doing well tonight. And it looks like I might have got here on time, possibly. Had a bit of cleanup to do around here. You see, we did give him a set of new shoes to stand on while we finish painting him up. The base, of course, I've got all the base coats done for it. We will finish it up, of course, once the giant is ready to go in place. Had a couple of people tell me, felt like it was a little too verdant for his being a frost giant and all. However, lots of stuff still getting added on here between all the snow effects and some blue hues and everything as well to kind of cool it down. But pretty cool little start, if I say so myself. So tonight, of course, we're going to push this guy a bit further. As you see on the thumbnail, we're going to be working on these furs across the top of him and maybe starting to do some of the rope work on here. That's going to be a really tedious process. So I'm still a little apprehensive about making a stream out of, 2 hours of painting the same thing. So we might jump around a little bit, add in a couple of other things. What I'm going to start with first and foremost tonight, assuming this airbrush is working correctly, is we are going to go ahead and get a protective coat on this. I've got a satin varnish we're going to put up on it. Likely going to finish the model with a matte coat. I don't have a matte on hand, otherwise I'd use it now. But the satin will also help us a lot with if we need to clean something up. That's going to give us a little smoother of a surface, which means, a little airbrush cleaner. We can likely just wipe away any small mistakes that we make. Something like a matte, with how pitted that surface is, wouldn't afford us the same opportunity. So we're going to get that kicked off here tonight. What's going on, White Chocolate? Great to see you. Yeah, Cryface left me a bit of a mess, but that's, not a big deal. Not anything that we can't address and correct. Hopefully you guys got to tune in to Wake and Make on Monday with Cryface. You kind of got to see my other half, as you will. I thought the show went well. I know I really enjoyed it. Hopefully those of you guys that did tune in enjoyed it as well. The goal is to have him run a Monday stream for us. So if you liked what you saw, we're hoping to be able to give more of that to you. As always, we would love your feedback. What type of things have you enjoyed from the show? What type of things would you like to see that might not be here or improved upon that needs work? Make sure you drop that in the comments of this video on demand. That way I can check back and constantly kind of grow. Been painting for a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, we haven't been making videos very long. So, all of that feedback is going to be absolutely invaluable for us. Well, let's go ahead and get this guy started with a varnish to be expected from Cryface, Mushroom Mondays. Not sure what that means, but hey, I'm here for it, White Chocolate. Let's go ahead and get rid of this ugly mug right here, and boom, he's gone. Do make sure, if you are tuning in, that you do offer a friendly hello. I'd love to say hello back, see who's in here hanging out with us. Art projects like this are always enriched when we get to share them with other people. We spend enough time in our own hole, sometimes our own heads, so thank you guys for being here, for sure. Let's see if we can make a beautiful mess together. Of course, as always, start with just a touch of that airbrush thinner right there, just covering the needle. We want that to lubricate the needle from whatever we're putting in here, let it flow a bit smoother, keep it from catching on the needle as much. Give ourselves a nice little mix. And he was painting a very small Captain America. I am painting a very big Old Man Winter. So, get that camera right for you. All right, and we just want to lock this in to protect against some mistakes. Definitely got a good start. Last episode, of course, we knocked out the wood. Got to add some of that vibrant green to the model. Gives a nice little color play. We got to work on that tombstone right there off of his belly. Got to work on these horns. Now, I have been looking back at it, and I do feel like the top of the horns lack the interest the bottom of the horns have. So we're probably going to come back in and add in some tones to the top too to make it a little bit more richer and give it a little bit more color dynamics. I do have a playlist going in my ear tonight. Just went with a chill rock on Spotify. You know, I'm going to do my best not to sing along and embarrass myself, but no promises. And the goal is 2 more sessions. I'm hoping that Thursday night we're able to put the finishing touches on it, or at least be able to have it all set up to where we can wrap up kind of the busy work of it to finish it up off stream. So next week we're going to be getting into our next project. And it looks like you guys voted on YouTube. Looks like the resounding winner at the moment is Emperor's Children. So I did go ahead and put together one of the characters out of the Emperor's Children box today. And, you know, we'll get started on that next week. We've got Dean P in here. What's going on, Dean P? Dean P, White Chocolate, 2 of my favorite goblins. Great to see you guys. As always, appreciate the support. Speaking of support, tonight marks the start of our 3rd week on this new channel. And, well, you guys have put nearly 500 subs on this account in just over 2 weeks. That is incredible. The growth so far has eclipsed the growth that our Cave Reps stream has gotten. And I couldn't have done that without all your support. So guys, thank you for sharing with your friends, letting them know what we're doing over here. Definitely appreciate the comments, hitting the video on demand too. That's really helping push that out even more so. But yeah, of course, I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you guys so much for that help. So first up tonight, we want to go ahead and get working into the fur across the top, I do believe. I do believe. So let's just go ahead and get started into there. We're going to be doing, you know, kind of blue grays. So let's find some good blue grays to work with. But we also want something that just doesn't look like his flesh. So wolf gray we used on the flesh. Let me see if I've got something a little bit more desaturated in the grays department. Matter of fact, let's work up rather than from blue. Let's work up from a gray and then maybe move it over closer to a blue-gray. So let's see how this wizard gray, fairly dark color, 2 thin coats here. See what we can make happen with it. When can we subscribe to this? How do I become a hobgob on here? Well, you know, the monetization process is a fairly lengthy one, right? The first breakpoint is 500 subs. We are super, super close to that. However, that 500 subs is in collaboration with 3,000 watch hours. So after tonight, I expect to be somewhere in the ballpark of 200 watch hours. So we've still got quite a ways to go before the monetization of the channel in any capacity. But I appreciate that you have that interest for sure. Continuing to, you know, spread the channel about, sharing it with friends. Those will all slowly aggregate the watch hours that we require. And we'll get there eventually. But I'm not in a huge rush for it, guys. I'm just very, very happy to be here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just try and hit the individually sculpted hairs, leaving the darkness in the recesses there. And then we're going to get continually smaller with all of the colors that we add to it. So this will be a slightly tedious process, but not nearly as bad as all the ropes. And it does look like we're likely, as our favorite paint name dictates, going to need to do 2 coats to get the full saturation of the colors. Enjoy that pizza, Dean. I worked up here at the shop today, and these days I don't typically have a whole bunch of time for food, so I go for something that's quick and efficient. Today was, of course, McDonald's right up the street. So, grown man eating children's food. I love that. I love that. I mean, to be frank, I love kids' food, man. You make a fat guy happy with a bowl of mac and cheese. It's pretty straightforward, really. I might have to change the playlist because instinctively I'm wanting to sing along with everything that I'm hearing. Maybe get a nice little, like lo-fi track or something in the background, something instrumental. There, now we have 500. That's hilarious. I appreciate you on that, White Chocolate. Yeah, from there, all we can do, man, keep watching, you know? Now, once we've got all this blocked in, we're probably going to come through and add a filter to the underside. What's going on, Luke? Great to see you. Keeping the brush hydrated. There it is. There it is. Get Bless America. All right, I'm going to change this music in a minute. A lot of the under shading is going to do a lot of work for us here, right? Because we've got that nice dark blue mixed with a nice dark purple in the deepest. And of course that dark purple, we could look at kind of like a mother color for this. It's going to be in several parts of the model tying it all together. But it's going to just naturally give us some depth here that's just not descending shades of gray. The trick here too is also looking at it from different angles. My brush is only going to hit certain surfaces, right? We will want to get all the way around them with this first coat. Now on the following, as we start to get lighter and lighter layers being applied, we can let those focus on, you know, kind of just the top surfaces, and that'll give us more interest on the sides. If we don't, if we just hit the stuff that's easy to hit and don't catch all the different angles, then we're not going to give ourselves nearly enough room to create that gradient with the grays. Yeah, I was a little bit of jealous of Cryface on Monday. You know, he started painting that Captain America for Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is not a series of words I should have trouble saying, but for whatever reason I do. I've got some X-Men and Brotherhood that I'll be doing up at some point, but I've got to get some of these projects out of the way first. What's a little DMCA strike here or there, joking. Those AI scrubbers dig deep. Oh, really? Getting strikes on videos through Facebook, huh? There's a couple of flat panels on here that likely could get painted leather. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to replicate the brush patterns like for hair and just kind of transition that into what looks like this same fur pattern. Through that same thing we've talked about in previous sessions, just doing a series of small lines. Man, there's so many of my karaoke songs on this playlist, too. This was a terrible idea, chat. One thing I did forget to do before I went live was to go ahead and hit my Facebook, let everybody know I was here, but maybe I can have you guys help me out on that. If you don't mind grabbing this link, sharing it across your Facebook or your Instagram or wherever, let everybody know where you're kind of hanging out. Maybe we can introduce a few new people tonight as well. That would be super groovy. I did get to meet a few people in the shop today, introduce them to kind of some of the stuff we're doing back here too. So with any luck, maybe we'll see them hop on and take a look at the stream tonight as well. Okay, so now when we look at it from the bottom, we're okay seeing the blues and purples, and then we're wanting to see it on the top of it. We're wanting to see it a little bit more in the grays, right? A little more of the blue and purples in the shadows, with the grays taking kind of front and center. So let's cruise over into Carcharodon. This is a much lighter gray. And it's going to be a very subtle addition. So we're going to kind of stay away a bit from the base or roots of the hair and focus more on the tips of the hair. Let's go ahead and check our flow on the paint here. And many of these, we're going to be able to do the same kind of philosophy as we would with an edge highlight using the side of the brush. That way it stays on the surface. Some of them we are going to have to use the tip of the brush and just be careful with it. And again here, we're only going to paint from the top down. We're not going to worry about hitting all the sides like we did with that darker gray. We just want the hairs kind of getting lighter on the parts that are facing up and that are closer to the ends of the fur tufts. Chose to get started here because this project shouldn't take a ton of time to get it something we're happy with. What's going on, Ms. Natalie? Always great to see you. How are you? Just telling these guys, feel free to Feel free to share the stream. If you don't mind hitting your socials with it, let everybody know where you're hanging out this evening. Great way to support our efforts over here. Definitely becomes much more prominent and impactful on this second pass here. What's going on, Stephen Strait? Nice. Do some testers, Steve. Find some old scraps. Do some testers on it. You know, that way you can start messing around with the different consistencies of the different products and then see what happens with them, like with heat and without heat. You know, heat the surface of the thing painted on. You know, do another where you paint it on and then heat the surface of the thing. You know, really do some experimenting with it to get yourself comfortable with it. But lots of really cool stuff that you can accomplish with once you are comfortable. But yep, you definitely want to use a junk brush though. A junk brush is paramount. Getting some nice volumes to the fur. You know, Dean, I haven't seen Cryface use the Dirty Downs products very much, and it never occurred to me until you've said what you've just said there. That's probably why, because it's clearly not edible. And so I think our resident paint licker might just be avoiding it because he knows that eating that paint would be an inevitability if he were to use it. All right, and we're going to use Trooper White instead of a White Star. Trooper White being the slightly warmer white. And then, of course, White Star is a pure neutral. So no warmth or, cool to it at all. Now we just want topmost surface stuff for this. Want to keep it out of the recesses. Keep it from fully overriding the previous grays. Side of the brush is doing a good job at picking most of this stuff out. Now, I don't do a lot of traditional washes in a lot of my paint jobs. The fur here and maybe the ropes are two places that this paint job might call for it. Especially being that the reality is, I do have a somewhat limited amount of time to get this done. That Battle to End Alzheimer's is quickly approaching, and of course I needed to get it in the mail with enough lead time that, it's not potentially arriving late. So sometimes we make little concessions and use techniques that we might not use normally, especially when it comes to meeting deadlines. So to avoid deadlines when you can. The more projects you do that allow you to work at your own pace 100% are going to be better projects. They're going to be more rewarding. They're likely going to turn out at a higher result. And, the stakes go way down, right? So if it doesn't work out, not a big deal. See, 8 people have tuned in to join us. Welcome to the stream. Great to see everybody. Again, make sure you pop in and say hello. Love to know who's joining us here this evening. All right, let me change this off of my karaoke playlist because, God, I'm just going to embarrass myself. And how about something like this? There we go. Something nice and smooth and kind of chill in the background. We're going to take some of this Apothecary White, use this to kind of help blend it a little bit. Apothecary White does have a blue tone to it. It's right there at our mid-tone gray color with just a hint of blue. And this one is nice and thick and chunky right now because we are nearing the end of the bottle. But we're going to break it down immensely anyway. Let's go ahead and turn this. You can see that palette. I've got a good bit of water in the brush here. We're going to thin it down to get ourselves a nice little glaze consistency. That way we can be a little bit more generous with it on the model as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on kind of the top pieces of the fur, where the fur meets the leather. Let that be where most of the attention goes, letting some of the tips stay just a little bit more white. Now this is thin enough that it is falling in the recesses, but it's also transparent enough that you're still going to be able to tell the difference in the values from the darkest point to the lightest point, even after the apothecary. But what we really want is for this to unify those layers, so the 3 color layers aren't as obvious. So this is just gonna help unify everything. Super easy step that I think adds a lot of value to it, for sure. And this might be the thing that will help me avoid the wash, because I just am not a huge fan of washes typically. A good pin wash for like panel lining or something, yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. But a wash as a necessary step at every point in your model reminds me of painting in the 90s. And I'm a way different painter now than I was way back then. I do have some World Eaters I've got to get painted up here soon to add to that commission we did, specifically 20 jackals and 2 rhinos. Vehicles are some of my favorite things to paint in 40K. They really give me an opportunity to play around with my particular style of true metallic metal. You know, they also give me, you know, nice big surfaces that I can get really dramatic with the shadows on. And I've got a couple of nice little fine detail things planned for them as well. So kind of looking forward to getting that done. But that'll be, you know, like one session, one sit-down session. We should be able to get both of the rhinos complete. The cultists we probably won't do on stream. You know, I'll likely show them off on stream once they're done, but there's going to be just a bunch of like repetitious stuff to it that, frankly, I don't think would make a very interesting stream. So we're going to try and pick and choose what stuff we paint live versus, you know, that we do behind the scenes based off of just that, like the interest level of the task at hand. You can start to see those colors blending a little bit better now, while still having nice big obvious pops on the highlights where that white sits. Also, make sure you do drop a like on this video if you are so inclined. That's another really great way to kind of help us in these early stages of growth. YouTube doesn't know whether you like us or not unless you tell them. So let's let them know. And, if you don't like it, tell them that too, right? I do not have a fragile ego, so, we talk about a lot when it comes to self-improvement. And I was actually just having this conversation earlier today, that the bulk of your education comes from your failures, not from your successes, right? And so I would love for you guys to point out to me things that we're failing on this stream in terms of what would be entertaining, because that will be a great catalyst for growth. So, but do with that what you will. This is just that Space Wolf Gray, and I'm just going to push this into some of these recesses a little bit better. So like up under here, all the fur that's running right alongside that bone assembly, well, that's going to be a little darker than everything else. Some of this fur that's up underneath here, again, it's going to need to demonstrate that it's under the effects of a bit more shadow than those other surfaces. You'll see I'm putting very little paint on the palette, and that hydrated brush just really helps make that paint go a lot further. All right, from arm's reach, I think it looks pretty good. Let's let that dry, and then we can assess what changes we're ultimately going to need to make with it. While we do that, let's discuss some leather straps. This Amphora Red is what we've used to base out all of our leathers, and we're going to do that again. We want good flow and good coverage for this part. However, we're going to do it all based off the flow. I'd say that's a little bit more important than coverage because we can always do a second round of application to get the coverage where we want it to. However, if it doesn't flow right off this brush, it's going to create a texture. And then multiple layers would be detrimental. What's going on, White Chocolate? Definitely drive safe on your way home. Definitely hope the internet is working appropriately so you can come back and join us. But if not, have yourself a great night. Good Lord, some of these details are so tiny. This tiny leather strap on this arm right here. New Daredevil tonight. Excited for that. Anybody out there been checking out Daredevil? Keep spoilers out of the comments for me, though. I'm up to date, but anybody watching that might want to check it out, I don't want them to have anything spoiled for them. But if you're watching it, let me know. Are you enjoying it? If not, why for? Now this string right here is almost too small. And it's almost inevitable that in painting this, we're going to go out of the lines a little bit. So we're going to just try and go out of the lines as little as possible. And then just make sure it's consistent across, right? So if that means we go out of lines a little bit, we're going to go out of lines that same little bit across the entirety of the thing, just to make sure our line weights match up. It's small enough that it's an obscurable detail, which means we just want to make sure that, like I said, those mess ups and getting the line weight accurate will make the mess up a lot less obvious. We've got those blocked in, so what I'm doing now is just going to go back across the other stuff that's leather. We did not have a varnish on it, and so all the handling has pulled some paint off of it in places. So we're just making sure we've got a nice solid coat on here. Especially the ropes themselves, they do have the detail of kind of the rope weave, if you will, or the twists. And so a lot of that surface is kind of coming off of it. Of course, this is the side that I messed up in assembly. We talked about this. I do have those two pieces that we're going to be adding to this just to make up for it. Call it additive corrections. I haven't watched any of the next season of Wheel of Time yet, but I hear it's very good, so I'll have to give it a go. I am up to date on Reacher. It's I don't know if I'd call it a good show, but it's a fun show. I enjoy it, right? And sometimes that's enough, right? You know, you don't have to. Not everything has to get the full critique or like the critic view on it. Sometimes you just want to be entertained for a minute. And Reacher will do that. Of course, Dan probably sitting at home cringing because I am an extremely tough critic on other properties, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings related stuff. I'm an extremely tough critic on them. But that's just because I expect so much more from like those genres. I don't expect much from Reacher, you know. It was first played on the big screen by Tom Cruise at his towering 5'4" presence. This new Reacher is much better in the fact that he is quite a big dude, and so when he is sharing a scene with another big dude who's considerably bigger than he is, it's like it really gets the message across much better. You know, a big guy standing next to Tom Cruise, like that big guy might only be like 5'10" because Cruise is so small. Gentleman was great. It's a Guy Ritchie joint. I enjoyed that a lot. Now we do have a similar task, right? A bit of an obstacle to overcome on these that we had when deciding our wood colors, right? We want to, even though we're using this amphora red as a base, we do want the ropes to look different from the wood, to look different from the leather. And being that they're all kind of in the same general brown family, we just got to problem solve that one. Figure out in what way do we want to do that. Not a tough question to answer, but an important one to answer for sure. Yeah, and that's what it should be, right, Dean? Like that's kind of what movies were designed to be. Now it's nice to have a movie that's profound, right? Something that like you're going to remember for a long time or is going to be the basis of a bunch of really nice conversation, right? Those are great movies to find, but we don't want to expect that out of everything we watch. Matter of fact, if that was the expectation is I only want to watch, you know, movies that are, you know, that impactful or that profound, well, now we're just going to be disappointed anytime we watch like something that's like a for the fun of it movie. And well, I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. Yeah, I like Guy Ritchie a lot. Ever since Snatch. Guy Ritchie and What's my other guy's name? I already forgot it. Just getting all of this blocked right back in. You like dags? Yeah, that movie when it came out, Dean, I was not prepared for it to be as good as it was. Brad Pitt really had a period where he was only making good movies, dude. Fight Club, The Mexican, Snatch. That was a real golden era for the guy, man. I know he is on the map, especially with the ladies, for things like Legends of the Fall and otherwise. But those three movies right there put him on the map for me, for sure. So, one of the things we track here in the studio, because YouTube does, is called peak concurrent, and it's how many subscribers are watching you at your busiest. And I think our best stream so far was our first stream, and I believe it had a peak concurrent of 12. Really good. But yep, the new record it will have to be by beating 12. So I see we got 9 here hanging out with us at the moment. I'm curious if tonight might be the night that we break records. I don't think I'm getting this on the camera because it is a weird angle to have to get to it. So up underneath in his little gooch here, I don't like the colors as much. It needs to have much stronger shadows on it. The purple is kind of standing out from the cream too much. So we're just going to take this color and we're going to force that down into those shadows a bit more. And then we might come back with that flesh tone just to tweak it again. Okay, got some ropes on the boots here. Okay, that's looking pretty solid. We're coming back over here to the white just to add one more pass and some highlights on this fur. And we can be pretty selective on this. This isn't, not every piece will need a highlight. You did see the Mexican, right? I think that was him and Julia Roberts, Dean. That was another one of those movies that I just didn't expect much from. And then it turned out to be really good. See, and like that, an hour is gone, and it really feels like we've barely done anything. Meanwhile, the fur's almost done, but there's just so much into the leather straps and ropes that just doesn't move fast. And I greatly prefer painting when I can get a lot done, I'll tell you that. What's going on, William Payne? How are you, sir? All these little strappy bits on the horns. I am seeing a couple places where I'm putting paint down that the paint is thin and it's kind of beading up off of the model. A lot of that is that satin coat we put on it that's protective. You know, the further from matte and closer to gloss you become, the more impactful the surface tension is going to be on your paints. So something like that might just lack the necessary tooth to get the paint to grab it and stick to it. I mentioned last week, I'm going to mention it again, if you're going to paint one of these up, figure out how to subassemble. It is something that I have regretted every time I've sat down to paint this. I've regretted not having it in subassembly because there's certain things I could have done so much more with had I not had the rest of the model in its way. All right, over an hour in, we've earned a stretch. What's going on, Wraith Mace? How are you, my friend? We are the Hammer. Well, thank you for taking your night off and spending it here with us, William, as always. It's always good to see you here or in the game streams. I am curious if there's any new people that have tuned in to check out what we've got going on. Okay, so I think we want to take the leather straps and put a little bit more orange into them. We chose yellow for a lot of the wood. So we're going to give this a try. And this is for the straps, but not the ropes. So go ahead and get ourselves a nice consistency off of it. Again, flow and coverage is what we're looking for here. And for this stuff, I'm going to focus primarily on the stuff that's focusing up. I'm not going to worry about wrapping all the way around. We're just going to kind of inform where the light is hitting it. Coverage is a little bit weak. Flow is good. Coverage is a little bit weak. Let's see if we can improve that a little bit. Come back to some of these where the coverage is a little thin. And it's a close enough color that it's not going to stand out as like a bright orange on the model, but it's also different enough that adds a little extra interest. Okay, now so there's some of these leather straps on the back that have the rope is kind of over top of the strap. So we're going to paint the top part of the strap, leave a bit of shadow between it and the rope overhang. So just kind of paint that outside edge and just leave a little bit of shadowed area. All right, my phone has dinged like 8 times and I haven't checked it. So if that's you messaging me, give me a moment. Give me a moment, I'll have a look. And if you guys pick up on a weird breathing pattern I have, a lot of times when I'm doing detailed work, I find myself subconsciously holding my breath at certain points, which results in a big air intake at the end of it. It's been brought to my attention several times at the home studio, typically by people going, "Are you all right?" You know, but it is not a sigh of exasperation. It is just my natural process for being able to maintain my focus there. So I'll survive it. Don't you worry. I mean, I like where that little bit of orange getting added to it. That's looking pretty good, huh? Oh goodness, there's gonna be so much touch up on this flesh to do. Something I was really kind of hoping to avoid. But it appears to be unavoidable. Take a little airbrush cleaner here. We put that satin coat on it, so if this happened after the satin coat, this might pick it back off of there. You see this right here? We'll be very gentle with it because we don't want to destroy it. Airbrush cleaner is a slightly safer way to do it, or thinner rather, because the thinner doesn't have what it would take to break down the medium. That worked quite well actually. The cleaner will break down the medium, you know, where a thinner is just kind of going to loosen up pigment. Again, we just want to let them dry. And once they're dry, then we can come back in, add further layers to build up the saturation of the color and get to the right vibrancy that we want. And part of this is why we're going orange and why orange works. When we take a look at our blue, what's directly across from it. All right, so that is the farthest that you can go in terms of contrast. Now we're going to be bringing the orange up. There's a lot of red into the brown. We're going to be bringing the orange up further into yellow. But when you look at the warmth of what we're going, with this being our pivot point, that's our main focus. And that's what's kind of informing a lot of the decisions that we're making with what colors to put where. You know, we're not going off of just like, hey, I think that would look good. We're going off of, you know, kind of the science of color, right? And using that color wheel to help guide us. Not something I've talked about much in past videos. I definitely haven't talked about it enough. But that is one of those things that is always on my mind when I'm working on a project, is thinking about what would sound color theory dictate. All right, well, that was easy enough. We've got one more strap right here we missed, looks like. How many of you guys got to check out that wake and make yesterday with Cryface? Now, we need to think about highlights, and what I don't want to do is desaturate the color. So what we're going to try here first is we're going to try this Craven Yellow. It's a very good, pretty high vibrancy yellow, right? Not the highest vibrancy. You see Serpentine does get just a little bit deeper on it, right? So this has got a touch of desaturation to it. But I want to see how this breaks down with this orange, if we can do it without desaturating it too much while still giving ourselves a good highlight color. So I think that looks pretty good right here. Let me just turn this so you guys can kind of see. So let's work with that. Now here I'm less worried about coverage, more worried about flow. We're going to be making multiple passes. I want there to be some transparency because I'm just going to be picking kind of the brightest spots and adding it. So a little bit thin is better. That way we can bring it up just a little bit at a time until we've got it right where we want it. But that should help us really define the shapes of these leather bands as well a bit better. Remember what I always tell you, the color is going to deposit the most where your brush ends, not where your brush begins. So I want you to think about that when you're putting your strokes down. This, for example, it's a loose, very loose and very thin paint, right? So it's going to be a lot more saturated of a color wherever it pools up like that. And it is going to pool up like that because of the viscosity of the paint as we've got it being applied right now. So just make sure your brush is ending where you want your highlight to be the strongest. I'll go back and forth and then finish in the middle. For those of you looking to get into non-metallic metal paint, this type of blending is basically the foundations for it. Glazing, yeah, yeah. You know all too well, Dean. And I'm just getting those blends by taking and starting on the outside, moving it towards the middle. We kind of want this color to be fully opaque right there in the center. And then from there, letting the outsides have a gradient to them. So it's not like a water line on where you started and stopped your blending. A couple of them are doing pretty good on their own, so I'll just come back in and ramp up that light point. Let's see if we can get a better look at what's going on here too. So you can kind of see this edge right here is kind of obvious. So we're going to add just a little touch there. You can really see it right here. It's starting around where it goes around the back of the arm. It's going to be just that amphora red. We're not even touching that color really. Right? But as it rounds that spot where that light's going to be hitting the arm, it's a little bit brighter than everything else. Very impactful when done correctly. And it's not that difficult, really. All right, and then there's going to be some edge highlighting here. Because the yellow worked for the mix, we're going to give the yellow a try for just a couple of edge highlights in a couple of certain spots. And this is just going to further help us define our shape. I'm focusing this yellow edge highlight centered on the places where that orange is at full opacity and letting it kind of fade off into the dark. I don't really need to edge highlight something that's in shadow. I don't need to reinforce its shape. It's obscured by the shadow. What we want to see is the light interacting. And that's what edge highlights do for us. So when you're looking at getting an edge highlight job done, you don't have to look at doing the whole model necessarily. You can pick the paints that are in the heaviest amount of light and accentuate them. Again, using the side of the brush against the corner of the detail. Oh, let's get this focus back right. Y'all should yell at me. Okay, we do have those pieces to do up top. Being that I know that I like it, I can come back and repeat this process for the things that have been missed. This does not have a corner per se, so we're just going to get in here with the tip of the brush and be very, very delicate. But this is doing a really nice job, especially where this strap is kind of right adjacent to the blues. This really helps punch that up too and really push the contrast between the two of them. And sometimes a good edge highlighting job should be hard to notice. If it's doing his job well, then that edge highlight's not going to just stand out. All right, it should be working in synergy with the rest of your blends to kind of tell the lie. And remember, lies are subtle. A big, bold lie is a lot harder to keep. Okay, let's thin out some of this just a little bit more and see about doing just one strong point of highlight. I'm going to thin it out a little more than that. Maybe pull the extra off the brush. And this, I'm trying to avoid that paint deposit. We use the paint deposit on the orange to build up the saturation. Here, I don't want that deposit because I don't want there to be anywhere on the model that is full yellow like that. I just want to highlight up the straps a little bit more. So the way I accomplish that is by once I've got the paint on there and I can see where that drop is going to go, I pull it up over and off the piece rather than starting on the piece. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come back to that amphora red. Get it nice and thin. I'm going to check the tip of my brush. Looks like we got a teeny little bit of paint drying on it. That'll create a round surface where we really want to point. So we'll clean that off. And then again, we want people to know it's leather, so we're going to turn to texture to kind of help inform that a little bit. And so right now I want really, really thin lines that we can come across the model. And add tiny scratches. One or two per band is probably enough. And you want that line as thin as you can get it. The thinner, the better. Every so often you might throw a scratch out that kind of overlaps the first scratch. Creating small little X's. And I really didn't like the way the paint was sitting right there, so I'll pick that as a spot to put a scratch. Adding that little detail can kind of help hide some of the things that might be considered mistakes underneath it. Few more on the front, making sure we're changing the angles that these scratches go to make it look a little bit more organic. Once we've got those dark scratches in there, we're going to add the highlight to the scratch. That'll help us really sell the effect. So I'm going to come back to that yellow is our edge highlight. I don't want it to go up that high, I don't think. So we're going to turn to that yellowy orange that we made, which seems to be drying up on the palette a little bit faster than I want it to. So see if we can rehydrate and bring it back to life. If not, we'll just mix it a little bit more. Pull the extra moisture out of the brush, because in this situation, we want a certain amount of opacity. And I'm going to come in right underneath the dark line on all of these and add a lighter line. Assuming I can get the opacity right. Right there just feels a little messy and I don't like it. So we'll have to come back and readdress that in a moment. Okay, that does not appear to be powerful enough of a color shift, so we are going to go ahead and touch into this really bright yellow here, that edge highlight color. And let's try it then with that. So again, right below the dark brown line. We want to put a small yellow line. There we go. That is much more impactful. And let's drop our edge highlight back on here. We had to clean up a little bit. Okay, let's get a closer look at that. You can kind of see those scratches right there on that belt. There we go, that's pretty crispy right there. Moving around to this arm brace. See them there. That's what we wanted, right there. All right, so the final thing that I'm going to do here is, now that we've added highlights, it's important to retouch our shadows. Again, thinning down this amphora very, very thin. And we want flow here. And then we're just going to take areas where the shadow has softened up, especially the places adjacent to those edge highlights, and we're just going to punch that shadow up again. That actually looks pretty good right there. And we're going to try and stay on the top of the band. We don't want to paint the arm. We don't want to paint the surface of the band. We just want that area where the band meets the arm. Luckily, in a lot of these places, it's still pretty solid and still pretty good shadow application. But the places where it's a little bit weak, like this arm right here, we're just going to get right under there. Nice points of interest. And again, a lot of the blending and mixing, everything we're doing right there, you can use whites or colors that are desaturated with white and accomplish, very similar things with it. You know, but I try to avoid that when I can. Let's see if we can aim this up. Let it rest in such a way where you guys can get a good look at it real quick while we give it a little stretch. How's that? Well, I am pretty happy with how that has turned out. Nice to be able to get to do some glazing as well. Let's move on to the next series of details. We talked about all of these ropes. I think what we're going to do with all of these ropes is we're going to take a nice flesh tone right here, something like this pale skin. We've already used this color in the composition. It's a lot of the edge highlights for the leather. So knowing, like, you don't need to add as many colors as possible to your work. Matter of fact, a lot of times that can be a detriment. So when you're picking colors, you want to think about colors that can be used in multiple different ways, right? In multiple different places. So I'm bringing this down pretty thin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the tops of all these ropes. And I'm not going to be worried about getting all the little dots and painting in all the little cracks and all of that. I just want to paint the tops of the ropes to a near full opacity, leaving the bottoms of the ropes that brown. And like right there, I'm not going to connect that. I'm going to let that be separate because these are such small details and we really want, our paint job we're going for here is kind of tabletop plus, which means arm's reach is really going to be its best viewing distance, right? I want to just make sure that a lot of the points where those shadows are going to be are nice and dramatic. Now, I talked about I'm probably going to use a wash, and this is likely where you're going to find that wash is going to go. It's going to go across these ropes to really help define a lot of the ridges between the twists. But we want to leave plenty of shadow here. If we overwrite too much of the shadow, not a big deal. We can take that same base color, that M4 red, we can thin it down, and then we can do the exact opposite of what we're doing here by hitting all of the things that are underneath instead. And back to that blending that we were just doing, the more times you're willing to adjust the color value and reapply a new layer, the deeper and more dramatic you'll be able to make those blends. So I did basically a 50-50 mix in all the blending I've done on this model. What's nice about that is it's easy to remember and come back and eyeball later. But if I did a 50-50 and then I broke each one of those down again and had, more yellow in one, more brown in the other, right? And then you just kind of stack those up alongside of each other. And then a little glazing to smooth out your transitions. Subassembly. Why was I not smart enough for subassembly, chat? Even if it's just this damn arm, you know what I mean? Even if I just left this one singular arm off of it, it would have made my life a lot easier for paint. It might have made my life more difficult for the assembly after the fact, though. So I don't want to discount that by any means. Trying to get it reattached, or like the extra pieces that might have to have been left off for subassembly to accommodate it. But going with this color is why it was important that the leather next to it wasn't a desaturated color. Flesh tone is a very desaturated color. So that was a big part of why I wanted to make sure I left some vibrancy in that, so that way these overlaps of rope and leather, you can tell the difference between the two. Now, that being the case, because I know I want shadow at the top of the rope to help define it from those leather straps, we're just being super careful to leave some darkness right there. Doesn't need to be much. We've talked about the ugly phase in the past too. And a lot of time your ugly phase is kind of exclusive to that first part of your model where you're doing a lot of your base coats, and then you start clawing your way back out of it. This model has so many details on it that every time we pick a new detail, we engage a new ugly phase for a moment. So just be patient with those times and just stay on task. You know what I mean? Like just stick to the plan, and you'll get out of the ugly phase over and over again. Hey, congrats on 500. Thank you, Dan. Good to see you, brother. First stream was 2 weeks ago today. 2 weeks ago Monday, or yeah, Tuesday. 2 weeks ago Tuesday was the first stream. So being able to knock out 500 subs in those first 2 weeks, man, I'm very impressed. Very grateful as well, like we talked about at the beginning of the video. Getting that difference of color onto these ropes is really, even during this ugly phase, it's adding a lot to it. Just using our same edge highlighting tactic here just to get these little thin strands. Like, I can't even believe they sculpted some of this stuff on here, if I'm honest. What's nice about this, being this is my edge highlight color, I can also take some of these places that are the previous leather that maybe have dulled down through the application, maybe been rubbed off just a little bit pre-varnish. We can just revitalize them over here. We got the color on the brush. So just pump those up again. Just base coating all this in, but trying not to get full coverage, leaving plenty of brown in the background. Of course, big shout out to Too Thin Coats. It's all the paint you've seen us use so far tonight has all been Too Thin Coats. Wave 2's starting to make its way around the United States. Still a ways off from the release of Wave 3, but you know, once it is available and you guys have had a chance to get your hands on it, I think you'll enjoy it as much as I am for sure. That got a little messy there, so we'll have to clean that up. But easy enough to do. Dan, you excited to get started working on some assembly for some Emperor's children? Dan is the assembler extraordinaire around here. He's helped us out a ton by doing a ton of building for the streams. So why stop with a good thing? You know what I'm talking about? Oh, lots of leather straps under here. So we're going to come back and we're going to complete that, or redo that process that we did on those leather straps to all of these straps that are missing it. But again, we can do a lot of that stuff off camera. And then this is such an odd angle right here. I'm messing up a lot, but I know the color that I'm painting over. So again, I can get back in there and fix it. And the parts that I've accidentally painted on are going to be way easier to paint on purpose compared to these ropes. So be neat where I can, knowing that the places that get messy is not a death sentence. This is the part I was dreading the most from the time I was assembling, was all the little rope work. And there was a couple of them, a couple of variants, like a dude that has a rope net that's got a bunch of stuff inside of it, like kind of thrown over his shoulder like Santa's bag. And I was like, no way in hell do I want to paint all of those ropes and all the bullshit in between. No, thank you. A few more ropes on this bracer here. All right, down to these ankles. We're going to do these ankles later because I want to try and get more stuff covered over the course of the next 45 minutes. So we're going to do the next stage on some of those ropes once they've dried. That's what we're going to put our focus into now. While we wait, I'm going to go ahead and just ramp up some of these edge highlights here, especially on the underside of the leather. It's got more of a fleshy color to it. Let's just do this to create a little bit more distance from the brown underneath it. I think that's kind of cool. I'll also probably look for another place that I might be able to work in that yellow to gold to brown, maybe even across this wrapping right here. I don't know yet, but it might be an interesting spot to put it. Okay, shape the brush. These edge highlights just a little bit further. Okay, let's dig in on a wash. For this, we're going to go with, we've got a flesh wash here. What other wash options do we have? I don't think the flesh wash is going to be brown enough. Let me see what other appear to be missing another wash. Bear with me while we locate it. Go ahead and let these hands air out a little bit too. Gloves are very nice for keeping your oils that are in your hands off of the paint, but waterlogged hands aren't great either. What's everybody working on at home? All right, this is necrosis green, two thin coats, a very brownish green. I want to first of all put it over top of that little decomposed hand. Let's see what kind of hue it represents. Now it's going over top of a very putrid green, as is, right here. So it might not really show us too much in the colors, but I'm leaning on maybe this color for the ropes to add a little bit more color variety throughout the model. Why don't we find ourselves a little test area that's easy enough to paint? Let's try the green over it and see if we like it. So like right here, I like the green because it's gonna work nicely with the brown underneath it. And I think that works. I think it works. And we're just going to fully cover it. I want it to overlap the brown too, because I want it to slightly tint that brown. And of course, the green would convey a lot stronger if this was over top of, if we had like blocked all this in with white, as if we were preparing it for a contrast. So the fact that it's over a flesh tone, which has a little bit of yellow in it, but also has a little bit of red in it. The red and the green, think about color theory. Again, let's go back to our color wheel. Red and green, these have great contrast. However, if you mix them, right, well, chances are they're going to dinge out and become more of a brown, right? You're going to sap a lot of the vibrancy as those two vibrancies are going to overlap each other. And then you're going to get a shade of brown that typically is not very attractive, right? But there are times that you can leverage that to your benefit. Like right now, that brown effect that's coming through, taking it away from green gives us a different brown value than what's everywhere else on the model, but it's informed by a brown that's on everywhere else on the model with the shadow work we've done underneath it. That's why it works. And I actually like it quite a bit. We might come back and add some highlights to it. You know, if we wanted to, if this was like something that was like top end showcase, like really like going for, you know, honorable mention at a Golden Demon or something like that, we would probably come back in and highlight every single twist of this rope. Again, all of our paints tonight, all too thin coats. Shout out to our other sponsor as well, Artis Opus. These brushes have been doing an incredible job throughout the entirety of this project, so absolutely appreciate you guys providing us with these brushes to use here on the channel. You know, we used both the S series and D series brushes. Now, how many of you at home might have thought, hey, you should put a green wash over that? Anybody? Is that on anybody's bingo card? I can tell you with certainty it wasn't a part of my plan, but it just demonstrates what we've been talking about. You know, about sometimes you just figure it out as you go. You get the most important element done, and then piece by piece, you just kind of do your math to determine what is the next option. I think another reason why green was a good call here is that when we consult that color wheel still right there on the desk in front of us, you see that there's a good bit of distance between purple and green. right? Right, so having the inclusion of this purple as our shadow color and the green that we're using, although it's faint, they should look really good against each other. Maybe not very good mixed together, but alongside each other, color theory suggests that it should work. Now, if I was responsible, I'd be putting gloves back on now, but I want to just let my hands air out for just a few more minutes. And the little spots that we didn't get full coverage with that flesh tone for these ropes, I think looks very nice. Get a little bit more of that brown peeking through. I definitely think that these turned out pretty cool as well. The other little leathery straps, pretty groovy. Okay, well, we know what direction that's going to go to get that complete, so we can, again, behind the scenes, go back through, get all of those ropes back up to that same place. And you see how close it is to the yellow straps? But you can just subtly see that little bit of green in there. And then this is going to be covered in snow. We used a lot of the same colors on the base that are getting used on the model for the same reason, just that unification. Okay, I do need to get in here and fix this bell that we snapped before because it is getting looser and looser. So let's just take a little dab of super glue. Oh, that's a lot more than a dab of super glue. Let's clear some of that out before we make a huge mess. Okay, that is not what I wanted to see happen there. But make the best of it. That's how we get through mistakes. Let that set for a moment. All right, well, with the ropes out of the way, and with a lot of those leather straps already figured out as well, we can figure out what the next thing we want to mess with tonight is. Gotta let that glue dry though. Fair amount of waiting time, right? Let's do something with this base. We're gonna go ahead and pull him aside, let all of his drying get done. I wanted to add more detritus to the base here. And I think I want to add a little bit more blue-gray into that stone. I want that to feel kind of like a slate. And right now, it's just it doesn't look different enough for me. So we're going to make some touches on that. A part of the detritus that we're going to add, we're going to take some of these birch bark seeds. We want it to look late fall, so I'm going to leave green ones at home. All right, and we're going to be using nice fall colors and build that in around the base of those tree trunks and whatnot to add that extra layer, with the idea being that once we've got that all on there, the snow is then going to go over top of that, and it's going to overlap a fair amount of those. And you know, we can probably even do a little snow test tonight. I've got some flock right here. I've got some Mod Podge right here. Mod Podge being a glue and a sealer. And maybe we'll get froggy and mess around with a little bit of the snow. But let's see what we can do with the detritus and those stones first. So for this, we're going to need a brush that can absolutely be thrown away when we're done with it. And we need something a little bit bigger than the little blue brushes we've been working on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and make a mess with it. But rather than doing it over the trash can, which would probably be ideal, let's make a mess with it right here. I bet I've got, yep, like this tray will be perfect. I can use this tray, and we are just going to take a pair of scissors, which should be at my fingertips, but, well, I'm bad at things like organization. So let's locate that real quick. Find out where those scissors are. I found them. And we're going to cut the tips of this brush off. I want this to be rather flat across it. Just like that. This is a big old round, probably a size 6. And so we just want to cut the rounded portion off of it. Now what we're going to do, so we're going to take a little bit of our Mod Podge here. This is, let's see, do I have an option? This is gloss. Let's go with matte. Hey Matt, how are you? Let's get, I was going to say a little bit there, but instead we can do a lot of it. Good thing, the exemplar wet palette from Game Envy, shout out Game Envy. Good thing I've got an extra one. So these are dyed, these leaves right here. Let's back out so we get a little bit more workspace here. These are all dyed. So if I take and I mix this in with this glue, what's going to happen is a lot of that dye is then going to tint that glue a color that I don't necessarily want it. So what we're going to be doing instead is I'm going to take my brush here. I'm going to drop some in this other tray that's not overloaded. We're going to take a little bit of water, hydrate the brush real good, loosen up that glue. We want it to be a fluid instead of a goo. But we don't necessarily want it to be super runny either. And then let's just start picking out the places that leaves are going to be pretty good for it. Right? Like around these trees right here. At one time before these trees were busted off, those leaves were ready to fall. And of course, during the violence of whatever caused these things to crack and shear, many of those leaves did fall. So that's what we're going to do here. We'll go ahead and work some of that glue in kind of as a primer to get it ready to hold some of these leaves. All right, we'll use that as a guide, and then we're going to go ahead and grab some of these out. So just put a couple on the desk here. Any of you guys have seen my orcs in person have seen these used plenty of times. Does a pretty good job of kind of ground cover. Scatter them about to where we got them basically where we like them. All right, then we're going to get a little bit of our glue. A bit of our water. And we do want this to be a little bit looser than what we put down. Actually, we want it to be about what we just had a moment ago. I probably should have gone a little bit thicker on that first application. But what we basically want is we want something that when I touch it down here, that it's going to run across those leaves, down into the recesses, and let them collect and kind of flatten out a little bit. This is going to dry clear, and it's going to dry with a matte finish. But many of these leaves are going to be sitting underneath and kind of peeking out of the snow that gets gathered. So we want them to look like they've been there for a minute. We don't want them to look like they're freshly fallen. The trees have been down long enough for a bit of mold to start to gather on those trunks inside of the breaks and cuts. So this should be well baked onto the surface. And see if this glue is thicker, and I was trying to do this, this glue would be picking up the leaves a lot more than it is. And we want it to be able to go across it and just lock them in. I pulled these birch bark seeds, what they're called, off of Amazon. But I'm sure there are many places that you can get your hands on something like this. But they do make a really incredible, like, oak leaf for scale in our medium here. Adversely, there's people that sell paper stamps or paper punches that punch things down into the shapes of leaves. You can go something like that route as well. Depending on the paper you use, though, the paper might be a good bit thicker than what these birch bark seeds are. You can see on this base too where the feet are going to go. So I've got like a couple leaves in there, a couple leaves in here. I'm going to get them off of the spots that the feet go flat and add them to other spots that might add a little bit of interest. No particular rhyme or reason. You know, they don't fall in a way that's calculated. They fall in a random sort of space depending on where the wind takes it as they waft to the ground. So as long as they're scattered, you should be able to sell the effect. Now you guys are quiet tonight. I do know that the stuff we've been working on is not the most exciting. I'm definitely looking forward to, once this project is done, getting a couple projects executed that we can do in like a one video. I know doing something like that allows us to cover more ground, allows us to do more things that are more interesting, whereas this series has been a whole lot of, you know, we're going to spend one evening doing all the flesh work and then one evening doing all the leather, and like there's probably not a whole lot of interest to be had there. But those of you that are spending the time with me, hopefully you're enjoying the time spent. Hopefully there's some value you're able to extract from it. All right, well, I'm going to mute this so you guys don't have to listen to the hairdryer, and here we go. All right, that'll get it locked in. Not going to be fully dry. It's going to take a little bit of time to get it dry, but you can at least start to see the color of the leaves at play and what it kind of brings to the basing as well. Really disappointed that the video footage that I thought I was capturing for this, really disappointed that it didn't get captured. Something I think that we could work with here. Let's take that same orange that we used for our initial color here. I feel like the tree stumps need a little something else to them. So we're going to do that now. Just get a little bit more vibrancy back into them. This will really help bring out all of the crenellations within the bark. And these details are so deep. I actually get to do a pretty chunky dry brush here to make that happen. And these stumps came from Green Stuff World. I did do a quick look, saw that none of the stumps had initials carved into them. I was like, that would have been a really nice touch. So that's a free idea for you, Green Stuff World. You reproduce these at any point. Put a couple, put a little like heart with some initials in it or something. That'd be pretty cool. This will also add some nice contrast against that green moss that we've got on there as well. And now that we've worked this orange into the mini, it'll be good to have it represented on the base somewhere. We also want the tree trunks and stuff themselves to look and feel a little bit different than the ground it's sitting on. It's a different material, so this orange isn't anywhere in the ground basing. So it's a good opportunity to work it in. And I've been talking tonight a lot about colors in the composition and the reoccurrence of them, you know, kind of being a good thing. We are fortunate in the fact that we do have an element on the model that's going to allow us to just do something completely different in colors. Maybe utilize some nice strong red tones, right? Or even just like a really strong yellow. Something again that doesn't exist anywhere else. What that's going to do for us as well. You want to use the same colors in your composition a lot so it all looks like it belongs together. But contrast itself and interest itself sometimes are about the things that stick out. You know, one of these things is not like the other sort of thing. And one of the opportunities that we have on that giant model are those little snacky dudes he's got in his hand, right? They've got tunics, they've got pants. We're probably going to pick colors that aren't in the composition specifically for those to add a little bit of interest to one of the coolest parts of that sculpt. And I'll show it to you here in a moment just to kind of highlight exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we've got that orange applied. Now another thing that I want to do here is the inner rings of the tree right now are in the flesh tone that's already been used. Well, let's lighten those up. Let's really give some good distance so that way the external bark looks a bit different from what's inside. But yeah, and you can see some vibrancy, really kind of cranking that up. So for that, what we're going to use is this pastel yellow. Just a little bit on the wet palette here. Running out of space because my wet palette management is terribad. Get the orange out of there. Get our brush saturated with some of that yellow. And we're just going to kind of pick out. Like in this case, I can actually draw some lines inside of here. They kind of make you feel like the rings. And this color might be a little bit too light, but we can always add a tint to it. Put a filter on it, shift its color a little bit. What color, I don't know yet, but this at least will give us a clear palette to kind of get an idea on what would look good. So lines. Yeah, that is too strong of a color by itself, so we are going to want to filter it. Now, if I had it here, what I would likely use for the filter would be like a skeleton horde. Something that's just a little bit off-white. Like a very light khaki. And since we're going to filter it, I'm going to build up the opacity in the key areas like we've done for that first one we did. So that way it'll hold another color pretty well. And then we might come back in and redo some lines. But we might do the lines with a darker color instead of a lighter color. I guess one of the parts about doing this, and Dean, I appreciate that you've been enjoying it. I've really been enjoying having you here as well. But there have been several points during this process where we've gotten a lot done in a very brief period of time. You know, there's just so many details that have to be touched on this model that it just kind of feels like I've been doing the same thing the whole time. You know what I mean? But the big concern is, of course, making sure that you guys are able to enjoy what we're working on here. That, again, that you enjoy it and that maybe it'll provide a little value to you. What's going on, Jet? How are you, my friend? So Archaic Sepia is a little bit more yellow than I want. We also have a bone wash. Let's see what this bone wash. I said skeleton horde is what I would typically go for if I had it, and I don't. So let's see what this bone wash looks like from Two Thin Coats. It's got a little bit more red in it than I would want for my bone wash typically. We also have a battle mud wash. Let's see what that looks like. That's darker with just a little touch of green to it. There is a hint of yellow in that stump itself. So for this, I'm going to water it down a little bit because we're not trying to wash it, we're trying to add a filter. Let's see here. I want to keep some of the vibrancy of the moss that's deep inside. So I'm going to focus on just kind of like hitting the spots that we've put that pale yellow on. And actually that little tiny bit of green inside the battle mud wash I think is actually doing a pretty good job. This one right here looks like a cinnamon roll. The forbidden cinnamon roll. I definitely feel like that hue looks a little bit better, but I still feel like there's a bit further to go with it. Take a little bit of that flesh wash and work it around the outer edges. Give a little bit of color variance as well. Especially being that the outside bark is a nice brown color. Let's let that dry down and see how that's going to look. So, kind of the two of them beside each other. And it looks like on the next episode, hitting 10 o'clock right now, so we're going to be wrapping this up. I don't really have time to get into another big process tonight. Snacky dudes, face, mallet, and then final touch-ups on the model. So, although we might not be able to get it completely done on Thursday, I will be able to get it done enough that I'll be able to push it to finished by the weekend. But if we can get this guy mounted on his base by the end of next stream, and maybe even the snow drifts applied with only the final details left to paint, the touch-ups from where our flesh got, you know, kind of a little janky with all the extra colors, then we'll go ahead and go that route. But, you know, pretty happy with it. And looking at these ropes now, let's get you in close, have a look at these ropes compared to the yellow straps, and tell me what you think. Yeah, getting those Emperor's Children going. Working on basing them all now, huh? That is awesome, man. I'm really excited to see the finished product. Like I said, I'm going to close up the poll probably later tonight. But it looks like everybody voted on Emperor's Children being the next project on here. So I took one of the character models out of the box. I've got it assembled. And we're going to do kind of a one-shot paint stream to get one of those guys done. It'll be good to have, like we talked about, one of the streams being able to just focus on start to finish on something. Cryface was able to do that yesterday with Captain America, and he got probably 90% of Captain America done, So we're going to be doing something more along those lines too. Let's add some rings. Very carefully. Taking that same amphora red, which is the red-brown, and we're just going to be drawing some little lines on here. Pull just a little bit of paint off of there. Those lines are going a little thicker than I wanted. This turned out a little bit sloppier than I'd hoped for, so let's see what we can do to fix it. Taking that yellow, mixed with just a tiny bit of the amphora red, and we're just going to come in here and divide the thick lines into multiple lines and kind of break it up just a little bit more. Again, you just work with the thing until you got the thing, If you get it right the first time, every time, you ain't learning nothing. Paint bravely, make mistakes, figure out how to pivot, get the most out of your education. Absolute worst case, you have to paint something again. Not a big deal if you like painting. Which, I hammer that away so much because that's something that I wish I knew before I learned it. That was one of my struggles in the early part of my painting journey, was I could do something I was really happy with. Right, but if I tried to do something new, I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And so, therefore, I just wouldn't do it. I would just, keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I could be a lot better painter by now if I started making big mistakes early. All right, those leaves are all set. Come back with this brown wash here. Again, around the edges to reinforce that a bit. Let it overlap some of the work we've just done inside of there. To kind of soften that distance between the two colors. Back with a little battle mud wash across the middle to knock some of that white down a little bit. All right, well, that's a good start. We'll have a few more things to do on it next time. But there you have it. This is what, session 5 on this Frost Gargant here getting done this evening. So we've got a decent bit accomplished. Only have a few things left to go, guys. Only have a few things left. I'm so excited to get this thing finished. Not because I'm enjoying the project, because, I mean, frankly, I'm really excited to get it in JC's hands, too. So that way he can take some photos of it, get it out there, let everybody who's going out there to battle to end Alzheimer's know this is up for grabs, and hopefully, just hopefully, that'll help bring in a couple extra dollars for such a fantastic charity. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it is in the video description below. You do want to check that out. Battle to End Alzheimer's is going on next month, put on by 21st Legion Wargaming, and it is for an incredible cause, right? So whether you're able to take something like this home in the raffle or not, you contributing to that in any kind of capacity will be appreciated by so many. You know, even if it's a unsung hero sort of situation, you have an opportunity to do good. And you know what I say? If you have an opportunity to do good, you know, you've got an obligation to do good. So let's make it happen, guys. Let's make this the biggest battle to end Alzheimer's ever. Big thank you, of course, to the sponsors of the video, Two Thin Coats and Artis Opus. You guys were the real heroes tonight. Game Envy as well, with all of these gadgets and, you know, the wet palette, the dry palettes, all of the things we were able to put to use here this evening. Spray Gunner, we didn't see much of you, but I guess we did see that varnish step, so shout out to you guys at Spray Gunner. If you guys need airbrushes, airbrush accessories, do check the link in the video description below. You will find a little discount code to get those things in your hand a little bit earlier. Not to mention the fact that it's also an affiliate link, so it does have a little kickback for the channel for any purchases that you might make. That is going to wrap it up. I appreciate all of you guys being here, spending this time with us. Again, a huge thank you for helping us hit 500 subs in our first 2 weeks at it. That is an incredible metric that I am super, super proud of. And again, couldn't have done it without you guys. Be back here on Thursday night for a paint stream, but you don't have to wait till then to hear these dulcet tones. No, sir. We are going to be back here in the studio tomorrow night, of course, on the Hobby Goblins channel, putting forth a cave rep for you. The matchup tomorrow night, not real sure about it. I think it's Dan and John, but I know it's going to be a great time. So definitely hope to see you guys there. TJ and I say hi and thanks for the hangout. Well, thank you for coming by and hanging out as well. Until next time, everybody, keep your pants on.